Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become your confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I'm very pleased to have as my guest Thomas Wilson. And let me tell you about Thomas. Thomas R. Wilson is a writer, business owner, advocate, sensory-friendly events specialist, and community leader. His work within the neurodiverse and mental health communities has brought him international acclaim, and he works as an advocate as achieving government recognition. And so while his work is just beginning, he has partnered with over 40 businesses and is helping to carve out a specific niche that offers great value to the community. Finally, while his work is designed for underserved communities, he welcomes all to attend his work and events. So we're going to talk about what exactly are sensory-friendly events. Please join me as welcoming my guest, Thomas Wilson. Thomas, love having people that introduce a new aspect that will help people who sometimes don't even know where to go, how to get the help. And so I welcome you as my guest today.
Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. We start, Thomas, with really two easy questions. The first is just tell everybody where you live. Where do you call home?
I live in Colorado.
And talk a little bit about this journey that you've been on that really has informed who you are, what you do, and really why you do it. What are some of those pivotal moments, challenges, and really opportunities that have come across you on this journey?
Absolutely. So I always like to say my story starts as stories. I've been in love with storytelling and books and poetry, all kinds of things ever since, oh my gosh, longer than I can imagine. But I also, so part of the reason I work well with my community is I am also neurodiverse. I have my own mental health diagnosis. But I also grew up very much in systems of care that did not work for me.
Yeah.
I started off my early school years. I was told I was a prodigy, I was a genius, all these great things. I was so smart, had the IQ of a 35-year-old before I was eight, all this awesome stuff. But once my diagnosis is really kicked in around the age of 8 years old, after a very significant loss in my life, that changed radically. I went from that prodigy student to the problematic one, or the one that was too loud or didn't pay attention, or really, I've heard far worse things from educators in the school system. I'm not going to go into all of them just for the sake of not
Yeah.
triggering your audience, especially if they've had a similar experience. But long story short, I went from that prodigy to the student my teachers never wanted to work with. I also spent a lot of my life trying to get into programs, but was told I was too disruptive, or I wasn't quote unquote a good fit. I was too hard to work with, things like that. And especially working in healthcare now in my day job, I can appreciate that better. But I also know a large chunk of the reason I wasn't passionate about these things was it was very clear to me who actually cared and wanted to help, and who really didn't. I'm not gonna name the programs or the institutions just out of respect. I don't want to cause any drama or anything, especially because things change and healthcare evolves and programs
Right.
evolve. But it wasn't really until I was in high school where I got into a modified high school classroom. Um, and I remember I was down and out one day. I had been there for about 6 months and I had a really bad rage episode. And so I'm not here to say I was anywhere near as a saint as a kid. I put through people through a lot. I caused a lot of issues, but there were also a lot of flaws that did not help me in that. And so after I raged
Mhm.
that day, I felt terrible, as so many of us do, right? When we get mad, especially as a
Yeah.
young kid trying to communicate, trying to educate people on what's actually happening to me. I apologized to this teacher, and I remember he said, "Do you remember when you were first here, when you wouldn't talk to anyone, when you wouldn't answer questions, and when you knew no one, essentially?" And I said yes, and he said, "I would rather you rage and be upset and communicate
Yeah.
versus be so shy and afraid that you don't say a word." And that
Mhm.
was a sign to me as a young kid. They were someone who genuinely cared, really valued me as a person and wanted to see what was best. That school was really transformative for me and was a lot of kids having a really hard time in life, and they really worked with a lot of us. I also had a principal in that school who was life altering. He was
Mhm.
kind of my hero after I graduated because I found out all of the like sleepless nights he had advocating for me. He always told people how amazing I was despite my frustration. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore,
Mhm.
which is still makes me incredibly sad. The world lost a great man when he passed away. But I'm gonna move on again, not triggering anyone. It wasn't until I graduated from that, got into college. After I graduated, well, I went for storytelling and poetry. I wanted to write
Nice.
screenplays. But the school I went to was like, we're too new for this. We want you to go something that'll be a little bit better. So I got a degree in poetry of all things. And then not long after that, I realized I was spending a lot of my time in retail working a job I didn't like, I wasn't
Mm.
passionate about, and
Yeah.
so I quit. And after 6 months of trying to find my way, I ended up as a reading tutor for a while, and then in a day program. And then I landed my day job where I really started advocating and really fighting for my community. But in like 2021, to kind of summarize this, make this a little quicker, I really started to feel the weight of COVID, of my own lacking kind of mental health care. And I looked at myself as I was sitting on a little laying down on the couch one day and said, what is the one thing that's going to get me off of this couch, is going to get me
Mm.
motivated, and it's going to get me moving? And the only thing that really did, it literally lifted me off the couch. As I just jumped up and was excited, I said, I'm going to be a storyteller. I had published a few books and things at that point, but I wasn't super enamored with the literary world at that point in my life. And so about a few weeks later, I registered my business, RNH Creative Advocacy and Storytelling. About 6 months later, I landed my first gig, and then a couple months later, well, it wasn't until about mid 2022, I got my first job as a dungeon master working with the community. And I'll be honest, my ambition was I was going to be the public speaker. I was going to be doing all these great single storytelling events. But when I did D&D with this group at a place called the Autism Community Store, I really learned it was a good fit for me. And
Yeah.
then I continued that and continued that. Other events opened up. Other events, sorry, somebody opened the door despite me being in a meeting. Um, more and more events opened up, more and more businesses started talking about it. I got the opportunity to really define my work in empathy and person first care that I
Nice.
really wanted everything I wanted as a kid. I learned more and more. And so, like I said, partnered with over 40 businesses. I have now currently have international renown. I've been this year alone, I've been at over 12 conferences talking about things, and I've been able to turn this thing, this strange, wonderful, magnificent kind of dream into a
Mm.
reality. And every day
Oh.
it grows, and every day it's a little scary, a little worrisome, but it is a beautiful, complex thing that is a reality.
So our theme is sensory friendly events. Why don't you share exactly what are sensory friendly events?
Sensory friendly events are events that don't just, well, I'll start here. So I always reference concerts. I know
Yeah.
many of us love concerts. They have great music, great performers. It's a great sense of community. It offers a very non-ordinary experience for people. But
Hmm.
at the same time, they're extremely loud. Even if it's in a small space, they can be mentally and emotionally
Yeah.
jarring. If you're in a new place or going to see someone who's really renowned, it can be expensive. You may not know where you are fully. I know this is changing, but there are a lot of places still don't have sensory rooms for people to go to. If the lights and the people and everything are overwhelming, then
Hmm.
just factoring that in, there's merch to kind of get the whole experience. There's, crowded bathrooms. There's
Yes.
loud stuff everywhere. And if you're lost and afraid and worried, and then you're in a new space, you don't know how to get home. You have trouble finding your car if you have a car, or you can
Yeah.
be completely by yourself. And all of these things are deeply overwhelming just to being a human
Hmm.
being, versus having any sensory processing issues or autism or other factors.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I take those experiences. One, try to find a space where I feel like people can be comfortable, where they have a sense of trust in neutrality. I work really hard to make sure that I am that support person for people at all times, ensuring that I'm kind, considerate, and empathetic. I listen to people if they're stressed. I work really hard to make sure that there's a place someone needs to go, they have a comfortable place to go to decompress and relax. On top of that, the stories I do and the mission is meant to not be triggering, not be upsetting, to make sure. I know there's a lot of anger right now towards the term like trigger warning,
Mm.
but it's a deeply important thing. I don't understand it because it's been around in books and
Yeah.
movies and TV shows, right? Ratings are essentially just trigger warnings before that word existed. Um, and so I bring all of that in, but I also match people based on their needs. I incorporate shared storytelling elements, and all of it is designed to offer an escape that when people leave, they're excited, they're
Mm.
passionate about what they did, and they may or may not even realize they've gained community connections or
Hmm.
raised up their voice or practiced to sharing or exemplifying who and what they are. And at the core of what I do, and I think what we should all do as event facilitators, is not burn people out, but have them
Yeah.
leave excited, passionate, and encouraged and empowered when they leave. So,
Yeah.
very brief overview.
I think about that whenever I'm planning retreats is I want the women to come and feel empowered, excited, informed, and but I don't want them to leave and having to take a vacation after the 3 days they spent with you. And so often, you lock people in a room for 3 days and you dump all this information on them and it almost is a information overwhelm. So I can appreciate that. And also the noise factor. I think that's something that I noticed. I'm 67 now, but in my late 40s and 50s, I noticed that whenever I would go to bars or some concerts, but the especially bars where it's like closed in and the
Hmm.
noise level is just so much louder, and it's like, I'm not having fun. I need to go and step out for a little while so I can appreciate having that space where you can just have quiet for
Hmm.
a minute, yeah, to regroup, right? So, how can we build up the mental health community out there? Because there's a lot, especially you mentioned COVID. Uh, since COVID, that gave people a lot of time to think about their lives and really, what they've been putting up with, ignoring, pushing away, pushing
Hmm.
down, when that doesn't help you heal. So, talk
Hmm.
to us a little bit about that.
So I think one of the most simple ways to put this is, and I'll elaborate because this is going to seem probably overly simplistic, but probably obvious to a lot of people as well. We've got to start thinking about the mental health community when we are setting up stores, restaurants, like you say, bars. I actually don't go to bars. I gave up drinking like 5 years ago just because I didn't like how it affected me, and I learned very
Hmm.
quickly it's not fun to be at a bar when people are drinking, the music is loud, all that. It's so much worse. But all these spaces, our community, we need to start thinking about people. And I think that's
Hmm.
the heart of being in part of an underserved community is just so many people are taught not to think about like the mental health
Right.
community or really on an individual basis, our own mental health, right? There are so many people that, um, the term that I heard, which came from certain family members and certain people I knew who were older, was, "Oh, therapy is the devil." And I'm like, even as a young kid, I'm like, well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah,
And
really.
I have heard a lot of different complex, different things, and I think the big argument I hear now is part of the reason people are so disenfranchised with younger generations is they are selfish, right? They're
Yeah, you
putting
do hear that.
themselves first. And I think what the flaw in that is people are seeing younger generations put their mental health first.
Yeah.
And they're putting that over situations that are detrimentally, socially, and mentally just bad for us.
Yeah.
Um, and so many of us have been taught to just power through.
Hmm.
And that mindset is not healthy, right? If your day job, you're powering through, that's a bad sign. If you're in a relationship or a conversation and you're powering through, that's a really bad sign. And so
Hmm.
I think this is growing rapidly. We have to understand it's not bad to seek mental health care. It's not bad to
Yeah.
put ourselves first in that. And the other thing I will say in that, and this is something else I think we as a society have to be better about, is stopping to shame ourselves and
Yeah.
others who are experiencing mental health symptoms. Especially when I work with youth, one of the things I notice is so many youth are just inherently taught to shame themselves for
Hmm.
advocating for themselves, for asking questions, for their ADHD causing them to look away or want to look at their phone. And I'm not here to say shame is inherently bad. I think there is a degree of shame that is actually healthy and can teach us a lot about ourselves and boundaries and
Hmm.
kind of how to be human. But what I find is shame is such an American teaching mechanism, and it doesn't actually teach. It
Hmm.
creates inherent self-hatred
Trauma.
and trauma and blaming and all this stuff. And
Hmm.
I think once we start moving past this, and again, it goes back to that selfish comment people make. I
Hmm.
think when we start to unravel those wounds, we realize how big that is. And I think as a community, it's incredibly healthy to go, okay, you're anxious. What can I do to help you? Or even
Yeah.
if someone's anxious and they don't want to be touched, we don't need to look at that person as crazy
Mm-hmm.
or potentially on the streets or all of these labels that we put on people. And so I think it really does start with changing our mindsets, changing our attitudes, and refocusing how we support human beings.
Yeah. I work in one of my jobs with a young person, and she gets anxious as the stress level is going up, and I can tell that. And so it's like, okay, well, maybe you do this over there for now, and we'll handle this. Or are you drinking enough water to keep hydrated? And it really just forces you to breathe, just as you swallow. But if you don't, if you ignore it, or if I would say, as you mentioned, well, just buckle up here and work through it. It doesn't help. It really doesn't help. And so I think you really need to give them space, but they need to give themselves grace to say, hey, let me just say how I feel so that it can be dealt with.
That's so true. And I find there are very different mental attitudes between men and women in particular.
Yeah.
Men, I think we're so often taught that we have to power through
Oh,
and we
yeah.
can't reach out to people, that we actually unconsciously create our own bias against women, who I think there is some internal frustration among men that women get to be emotional,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
women get to have that, and then women are get judged for having emotions
That's
and
exactly right.
experiencing very natural things, and I think it's very much like a snake eating its own tail. And there are women who are absolutely horrid to men who feel their emotions because they want them to be a certain way. And it's
Hmm.
so funny to me. And I think if we just have better, we if we were taught how to communicate better
That's right.
between people outside of our circles, or even just communicate better to ourselves, it would solve a lot of different issues that pop up.
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons I've been so passionate about working with middle school and high schoolers to teach them public speaking. And it's not, the goal isn't really to have them going out on stages and things, but it's really to teach them just what you said, to be able to be comfortable and confident enough to tell their parents, their teachers, their friends how they feel, what they think, and do it in a safe way, knowing and being able to handle rejection or people that don't agree with you, but not starting a fight with them because they don't agree with you, but talking it through, being comfortable saying, well, that's your opinion and this is mine, and I'm okay with that to be different. I really do believe that having a voice is one of the greatest gifts we can get.
Mhm.
And too often middle school, high schoolers, especially with the social media stuff that they read, you can't put tone in a post. And so then there's things that are misinterpreted because the wrong words were used,
Mhm.
and people don't understand how those words could be misinterpreted. And so now you've got some mental health issues going on because of the way you feel and you don't know how to express it.
Yeah, that I will be honest, I am someone I have if I'm talking to a person, I can pick up all kinds of emotional subtext and intention and
Yeah.
things. And then reading a post on like Discord or getting a text message or all these things, it's I have to read it through like 16 times to feel like I actually understand it. And that's a really common thing.
Yeah. So how can we act with more empathy throughout our week? I teach leading with the heart, the head, and the hands, and so I, I know how important this is. So talk to us, as you work with others, how are you teaching them or advising them, I guess, we should act with that more empathy?
So there's so much I could say to this. I want to jump back once again, I think, to
Hmm.
start this off with communication.
Yeah.
Um, Communication, like you said, it's one of the greatest gifts. And communication, I always love to say, it's by no means just words. It's by no means just physical communication.
Yes.
Communication is deeply um
Mm.
so complex and so unique. And I think our world tends to forget that, right? We
Hmm.
tend to go, if you're not saying this way, you're saying it wrong. Or if you're not expressing yourself a certain way. It's actually a big part of my work is to challenge quote unquote traditional communication because there are so many factors into how someone can interpret something or say something or think about it. Um, but I think when we look at communication to help with empathy, I think the first part really is teaching kind communication. And I don't mean just being automatically polite or feigning interest. I mean, like actually teaching people how to express kind words, kind compliments, kind attitudes towards people. And I think following it up, especially in a world, and I want to say that feels so fast-paced, but I feel like there's never really been a point in human history, no matter how much we want to imagine it, where the world has felt slow-paced to human beings. I am a big studier of history and of human attitudes and interpretation and psychology over human history because we tend to get a rosy-eyed sense of the world when it's inherent within our little bubble. And history is a big part of that. And I think when we look back at how the world has changed just within the last 500 years, people have always probably been overwhelmed with new technology, new people, all this stuff. And so the first thing that I try to tell people, and I'll be honest, I am not perfect at this by any means. I say this, I talk about the value of it, but I mess up as well. Um, um, is stepping back and sometimes taking a deep breath, sometimes looking back and reprocessing why someone says something. But I think when we take that step back, it's so important to drop the ego, right? Um, if we hold on to our sense of, oh, we're great or oh, we're fantastic, that's not going to help. But if we're also feeling bad or hurtful about ourselves, that's going to create defensiveness. So I always recommend people genuinely let that go. Give that up for a moment to try to get a better sense of what someone's saying. And then a couple other quick follow-ups to that are I actually recommend deeply people have something that gives you joy that is just yours. Partly because I cannot understate having something that helps you decompress, that you do not feel the need to share with other people, or you do not feel the need to share with the world or share online. That is something that can be a really powerful coping mechanism. And the last thing that I recommend always, always, always don't automatically assume people are out to hurt you. Um, I think that we're so taught to do that in so many different ways. And I'm not saying don't carry survival mechanisms. I just mean someone may say something sarcastic. Someone may say something that's a little snide, but we are all human beings constantly dealing with thousands of stimuli and lights and all this stuff. And I've found very rarely when someone I can say it this way. Very rarely are people intentionally trying to hurt one another, in my mindset, unless they're truly awful people. And so I think when we step back, when we lower our defensiveness, our ego, and we try to understand what the person is saying instead of necessarily how they're always saying it or their intention to be rude or their intention to be kind. I think there's a real depth of trying to understand that person and what they're trying to communicate that occurs.
So, talk to us about strength bank based mindset.
Absolutely. I love strength-based mindsets. The way that strength-based mindsets work, and I'm going to say this first and then double back on a couple things. So strength-based mindset, I feel like when a lot of people hear that, they automatically soon assume you're only giving compliments, or you are only praising a person, only really focusing on the good stuff. And that's not what strength-based mindsets are. They are utilizing a person's beneficial traits, their cognitive strengths, their emotional strengths to feel supported during a skill, an education, a task, whatever the task is. At its core, it is removing what I call, and many of us call, a deficit-based mindset. So instead of saying, okay, your room is clean, but can you see this, this, and this? Do you really think that's done? And changing that narrative to, you've worked really hard on this. I can see the value here, here, and here that you've put in. Let's work together so we can complete this to be its best. It's a radically different kind of mindset to have. And I've utilized this in tutoring, I've utilized this in classes, I've utilized this all throughout, and the changes that it has in people and their self-esteem and their pride and their confidence and their skill set. Strength-based mindsets are obviously not for every moment, but they are such a powerful tool to change an inherent narrative, a skill set, or a community space into something that is supportive, empathetic, and truly built on the strengths of the people around us.
Awesome. Such good advice. One last thing. So, how would you advise um, families about really being able to be more conscious of things like you said, having sensory friendly events, but having a sensory friendly event or space? My godchild nephew is autistic, and he's really integrated into the world. He's in college doing great and all that. But as a child, especially a young child, he was super sensitive to touch of grass and all those kind of things. But they have things now like the weighted blanket where he would go into his room where it was quiet and have his weighted blanket and just like desensitize, if you will. I don't know how else to say it. But I think, in your home, sometimes you do need that space where you need to just go into your room and be quiet and be alone. And it's okay. And I think maybe it's the family needs to understand that they're not being antisocial or whatnot. They just need that.
Well, and I think so you said a term which I really dislike. I feel like antisocial is such a bias, socially destructive term.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up being told I was antisocial a lot, and I'm an introvert. I may seem a little
Yeah.
bit more outgoing. I have my showman side, all this stuff. But there, like you said, there's so much value in that soft, comfortable space. That doesn't mean you should
Yeah.
be there the whole time. And I think it's so easy to be the person on the podcast saying things quickly and making everything sound good. So a couple things I always recommend to families. One of them, and this is can be the hardest thing, is give yourself a break, right? Um, Caring for a family member, caring for someone who just wants to be in the sensory space in your mindset, or a parent who is constantly berated by the school or all this stuff. It is so hard to care for someone and do that in a consistent and
Yeah.
sustainable manner. Realistically,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
easy, especially when you throw in mental health stuff or autism or other neurodiversity things. You're just compounding it. And so when I say give yourself a break, I really encourage having moments where you can all have fun together. Because it can feel like there's so much shame and stuff bearing down on you that if you can have a moment to just breathe and laugh, I always
Yeah.
encourage that with families. The other things I will say is, obviously, I cannot give perfect advice and I cannot give as best I can without knowing people. But when your family member is going through those darker points, I really encourage you to not shame them, not make them feel less than for doing that. And that is so hard, right? It's so easy to say it and so hard to apply it in those deeply stressful moments. But I encourage giving people space. I encourage shifting it from um, this my child is being disruptive to what is my child saying to me? What are
Mm,
they trying to communicate? And a couple other quick ones, don't have those conversations when you're upset, right? If you
yeah.
need space from each other, step away. Do not feel that, don't give in to that need to argue. Give yourself time to separate, to come together in a positive moment and support them. And the last thing I have to say, and this might seem deeply deficit based, but it's true. The world is so much stacked against family members and kiddos and adults, and there's so much systemic bias and program bias, all this stuff. It's gonna make it harder. But the thing that's really gonna help families survive this is a solid relationship. It's a back and forth of positive communication. It's a back and forth of empathy being applied and utilized. And people with autism do have empathy. It's just a surge of that empathy that overwhelms us. And so have those positive moments, have that time to celebrate, have those communications, have those times to play, to watch a movie, to embrace each other, to celebrate each other and your successes. Those are all such small things that I can say so quickly, but having a positive relationship with your family and your family member who is struggling, that's going to be one of the best ways to ensure that they survive in the long run.
Well, time has flown by, and I want to share a slide that has your contact information to be able to have folks reach out to you. You have such great information, and I'm sure they want to learn more. So let me share my slide. For those that are just listening, you can get everything on my Vicki Noethling YouTube channel. Please do subscribe, as well as going to findyourleadershipconfidence.com. The website, rhcreativeadvocacyandstorytelling.net, and LinkedIn is Thomas Wilson. I'm going to turn it over to Thomas to talk about what you can find on that website and his LinkedIn.
So on my website, you will see article posts, you will see events that I do, you will see a bit of my history, artwork that I've done for this community, for the sensory friendly community. You will also see podcasts. I actually post pretty consistently on there, and you'll see a lot of different things. I am currently working on updating a couple things, so there are more content offerings. I'm actually heavily considering moving a lot of my social media over to my website, just because of consistency. On my LinkedIn, I do like to celebrate certain specific holidays that pop up each month that honor the community. I like to do motivation. I've also done articles as well on my website. But on top of that, I also post podcasts. And on LinkedIn, I work really hard to communicate and advocate for the community, offering highlights of those beautiful moments. I also do a lot of different things. In the coming months, I'm going to have more events that I do highlighted there. I'm going to have more of those beautiful moments, but I'm also hoping to consistently post short articles, do community spotlights of great partners and people I know. And the last thing I will say is keep an eye out because there probably will be more in the coming months as
Yes,
I am
yes.
able to renovate quite a bit on both.
Awesome. So, Thomas, thanks for being such a great guest. I look forward to chatting with you in the future again to see new things that you have. So, as always, I remind everyone that life is a journey and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling signing off.
Thank Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.